everyone, I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and today I'm going to do a design for you with the new 3-hold beams, which are a Checkmate product. They are a long beam and they have 3 holes in them. I'm calling this bracelet the Papyrus Bracelet. It looks kind of like a papyrus boat, and it's based on a herringbone stitch. However, in order to get symmetry, we are going to be using 2 needles. So it's kind of herringbone-like, but we're going to be going back and forth with our 2 needles to get the design. In addition to the 3-hole beams, those beam beads, we're also using some Potomac round duos in the middle, and then 15 and 8/0 seed beads. If you need any of the materials to do the bracelet here, in the top corner of the video, if you scroll with your mouse over it, a little eye appears. That's information from us as the video creator and provider, which will have some links in it for the materials. Also, if you ever need the materials, underneath the video, there's a description that has the date in which the video was produced and some details. If you click down on the Show More button, that'll give you links to all of these products as well. That way, if you want to get on and order them from us, we are happy to send them off to you. So again, for the Papyrus Bracelet, you are going to be using some beams. The beams, like I said, are a Checkmate, and they are 3 holes. And we're going to be using beams on the sides here. I have that metallic gold color. I'm going to be using the metallic purple suede in our design that we work with. In addition to that, the round duos down the middle. I have the zinc here. On the example piece, I'll be using the pastel white, which give it a nice pearl look. And I use tons of pearls and wear tons of pearls, so I'll have a nice pearl look to go along with it. In addition to that, we're using some 15/0s and some 8/0 seed beads. The 15/0s here I have are the hematite, and then the 8/0s are that light mauve AB. I'm going to be using the Miyuki brand seed beads, and I am using the champagne, the Duracoat champagne in the 15/0. And then in the 8/0, we'll use the dark topaz silver lined AB, which gives a nice kind of pop of color and shimmer along the middle of the bracelet. To close off the whole bracelet, I'm going to be using a cup button, and I'm using this in one of the white shimmer cup buttons at the very end. In order, like I said, to get symmetry with this kind of herringbone design, we're going to be using 2 needles. So you'll want 2 size 12 needles or size 11 or 10s. And it's really not going to matter because we're not going back through the beads a lot, but anywhere from a 10 to a size 12 needle will work for you. The thread that I'm choosing to use is Wildfire beading thread in the white 0.006. And we're going to be using about 5 to 6 feet of that thread, depending on how much length you need for your bracelet. Also handy, I always like to have a thread burner or a thread zap. This is the Thread Zap 2 by Beadsmith. There's also the cord cutter by Wildfire, or I'm sorry, by Beadalon, the Wildfire cord cutter, the Thread Zap Ultra, the original Thread Zap. Anything you have that's a nice thread burner. I really use the thread burner and depend on it a lot. If you don't have one, it'll kind of change your world. Pick one up, they're not that expensive. The other thing I have near me is a pliers. After I burn the thread off the spool, I like to pinch it down and make the ends a little flattened out, which are going to make it easier for you to thread your needles. You also want a nice workable surface. A Velux or a velour surface will give you an easier and faster method. I usually use my bead on it boards as I kind of carry them around and carry my designs around kind of from room to room. And you want to just have a nice surface to bead on because, like I said, it will make you a more efficient beader and easier for you to work with. So to get started, we're going to be adding our cup button right away. I want you to cut off or burn off 6 feet of beading thread and put a needle on each end of the thread. So you'll end up with a needle on either end and then little piles of your seed beads so we can get ready to go. So to get started, I have my 2 needles on my thread, and we're going to actually start with our cup button. If you have a clasp and you want to put on a wire guard and add a clasp here at the bottom, you can do that. You can even just do a jump ring if you're doing a clasp. Anytime you're doing a metal clasp, I always suggest using a wire guard and attaching to that. That would go on now, just like I'm putting on my cup button, which is going to be the ending or the clasp closure. To get started, I'm going to add a 15, 8, 15 onto my needle and let that fall down to the very base of the thread, right in the middle. From there, grab your cut button and go through, so you're going through like the bowl side or the bowl end. Go through one hole and then the other hole and out the back. There you're going to have just that pop of color right in the middle of that white shimmer cut button. From there, coming out after the cut button, I want you to add 3 of your 15s on either needle, so 3 on the right and then 3 on the left as well. And then we're going to take one 8/0 seed bead and take both needles through in the same direction. What this is going to do is create a V right after the cut button. That's going to sit nicely then when we put on our loop. So you have your bead sitting in the cut button, your 3 seed beads on either needle, and then you're sharing the 8/0. You want to make sure, since this is the start of the project, that at this point now that your thread ends and your needles are still equal distance. So just kind of take your thread, pinch it down, and make sure that's still sitting right in the middle. From here, we'll get ready to start our stitch. So the stitch, like I said, it kind of looks like a herringbone stitch. However, when I tried it out using one needle, it didn't work because it didn't line up. So I had to go to 2 needles. So this is kind of a cheat of herringbone where both sides are going to look the same. Normally when you're doing herringbone stitch, kind of one side is a little bit off from the other and it almost works in a zigzag pattern. So we're going to be doing basically a completely different stitch. To start out, we're going to take our beam with our right needle and we're going to do a pattern of our beam on, then 2 of our, before the beam we need 2 15/0s just to get us there. A beam, and then the pattern is going to be 2 15s, an 8, and 2 15s. And then we're going to do one more beam. Let that all kind of drop down next to your project. Put down your right needle and pick up your left. With your left needle, add 2 15/0s. And you're going to go into that beam and the middle seed beads from the opposite direction. So we're going to pick that up. The last beam, we're going to go into that first, through that first hole, going through the beam, the 15/0, the 8/0, and the beam, and then right out. So basically our thread is crisscrossing right along the middle there. So you can see kind of that design where it's happening and it's sitting in that V. So again, we have the 2 15s in the middle with the 8 and then a beam on either side. From there, we're going to progress up from the bottom hole of the beam to the second hole of the beam. To do so, add 3 15s on your right needle and your left needle and go from the first hole of the beam that your thread is currently coming out of to the second hole of the beam. Both threads then will come out towards the middle of the project. So you've got your 3 on the right, 3 on the left, and into the second hole of the beam. Give a nice little tight yank and make sure those seed beads kind of cooperate and sit down. From there, we're going to go in and we're going to add another set of our beams and our round duo. So you're going to grab another beam, and this time instead of the beam having seed beads in the middle, it's going to have our round duo in the middle. So the thread here that I have picked up on the left, I'm going to add another beam through its first hole, a round duo through one of the holes. The round duos have 2 holes, but it doesn't matter which one you're adding through. You just want to make sure that you're on an end. And then another beam. The needle then that's on the left-hand side is going to go through that center hole of the beam on the right that the thread's coming out of right now. Give a nice tight pull, and that'll pull that beam and the round duo right in the middle there. Thread on the right, we're going to do the same thing, going through the beam, the round duo, the beam, and the central hole of the beam before it, coming out then on the left-hand side, giving a nice yank. And that sets up then the next portion of our beam and our little papyrus boat oars there. From here, we need 3 more seed beads because we're jumping up from one hole to the next. So we're going to jump up one. We're going to jump up from the second hole to the third hole of that beam. When we do that, we're going to go through the third hole of the first beam as well as the second hole of the next beam. Give a nice tight pull to make sure that a project pulls in nice and tightly and you don't see any extra thread. And repeat whatever we're doing on the left or right, we do on the opposite side too. So we're going to go through here. If you happen to have a beam or a round duo that has a little bit of a stuck hole, usually that's just the coating. You can see I was able to kind of push that coating out a little bit, and then I don't have a problem going through that third hole and coming out right in the middle of the actual beam beads. So there I have them out right in the middle. Give a nice tight pull, and then we're back to the middle of the project. Whenever we get back to the middle of the project, it's kind of that time where you say, oh, okay, something else has to be added or has to be added in. For this time, once you're at the second hole of the round duo, we're going to add a 15-0 on our needle and sew from the second hole of the beam, add the 15-0 and sew through the round duo, second hole. Add another 15 on the opposite side and sew through the second hole of the round duo as well as the third hole, or the second hole, I'm sorry, of the beam as well as the third hole of the one before it. Taking the thread then on the left-hand side, we're going back through all of those beads as well and coming on out. So from here, I give a nice tight pull, and we have now our round duo right in the center there of our beams. From here, we're going to progress from our first beam, which we're completely done with now, and we're going to go to our second hole, or our third hole rather, of our second beam. To do so, 2 15s get added, and then an 8-0 gets added. We're going to go from that top hole of the first beam to the top hole of the second beam. And that fills in that gap nicely. And then again, we're out towards the center of the project. Again, left-hand side, repeating, 2 15s and an 8, and out towards the middle of the project. We're going to go back now and start the original design. So the original design, remember, was a beam, 2 15s and an 8, and 2 15s and a beam on the other side. So with the left needle or right needle, we're going to repeat that same starting pattern. Beam, then 2 15s, an 8, 2 more 15s, and then another beam. Again, you want to make sure that you're going through the bottom hole of the beam. And we're going to take the needle that's on the right that we just added the beads onto and go through the top hole of the second beam on the left. Pull that in nice and tight. Now I'm going to pick up the left needle here that's ready to go. And we're going to go through all of those beads that we just added. So I kind of turn it to the side to make it easier. I'm going to take my needle and thread back through the beam, the 2 15s, the 8, 2 15s, and the beam. Whenever you're coming out on the side of the beams, you want to make sure that you're not going through any of the seed beads. So there we're back to our starting pattern. And from here, we'll go back through that third hole of the beam below, so they sit nice and tightly in there. Remember, you're not going through any of the seed beads along the sides, you're just coming back out the beams. Coming back out the beams then, we are going to progress from the second beam to the third beam to its second hole. To do so there, just like we did before, 2 15s and 1/8, and then go through that middle hole. Again, because we're doing mirror images, whatever happens on the left, and there has to happen on the right, and vice versa. So we've got that design then on the right, and now on the left as well. So again, the thread's coming out towards the middle of the beams, and we're going to go back now, and you can look now because you have the pattern of exactly what the next step is. So our next step for our middle is going to be a beam, round duo beam. So pick up the right or the left needle, doesn't matter which one you start with. Add a beam, round duo, beam. Take the needle then from the right hand side and go through the second hole of the beam on the left. And pull that in nice and tight. Grab your left needle now and go back through those same holes that you just added on with your right needle. So I'm going back through the beam, round duo, beam, and then back through the second hole of the beam that your thread was coming out of. Again, make sure you're not catching on to any of those seed beads. From there, stepping up from the second hole to the third hole of the beam, 3 seed beads get added. I'm going through the top hole of the beam below, as well as the middle hole of the beam coming out near the round duo. On my needle, since I still have it in my hand, I'll pick a 15-0 up, go through the second hole of the round duo, add another 15, and go through the middle hole of the beam, as well as the top hole of the beam on the opposite side. Because you always want your beams to sit nice and close together, you never want to bring your thread out between the beams. I'll put that needle now that's on the left, which was the right needle, down, and do the same thing with the left. 3 15s go on, and retrace my steps that I just came out of, going through the central holes of everything, going through that seed bead and the round duo, progressing over then through those 2 beams lined up. And there we have it. So it's time to start over again. So it's just going to be that constant process kind of starting over. That from here again, you get your 2 15s and your 8 and step up to the next beam. Again, on the left, you're repeating that pattern. 2 15s and the 8, which the 8 works really well to kind of fill in that gap and add a little bit of color through the beam. There we go. Now we know it's time to add our center, which again is our beam, 2 of our 15s, 8, 2 15s, and another beam. So go ahead and work through the project a little bit, adding length and progressing with your papyrus bracelet. So as you get to the end of the design here, you're going to finish up your pattern, and when finishing it up, we are going to finish it up basically with the design. So because it is that kind of herringbone style where it's sitting in a V and it's getting longer, we're going to finish up the design at a spot where it's getting smaller. So we're going to kind of make up for that space and create our loop for our button to sit inside of. To create the loop, I'm going to go ahead in and just kind of have you watch as I progress a little bit more. I'll get out some more of my 8-0s. And we're going to go from the spot where we have our seed beads, and we're going to add in one more grouping of our round duo and use that as kind of our stopping point. So I'm going ahead in here, pulling that in nice and tight. Same thing on the other side. And if you're not as ambidextrous, it's nice to just kind of flip the project over and work on it with your right hand needle, setting the other one down and just continuing with the right or the left, depending on which hand dominant you are. So I get here then and add in that round duo. I'm going to make up for this space with some seed beads. So on the sides here, we're going to continue with our 3 seed beads, just like we would do with our normal pattern. Same deal in between our round duo. Use our 15. And come out the other side of our beam. From here, progress just like normal with the 2 15s and an 8 and go into the center beam here. Normally this is where I would add another grouping of my seed beads. I'm not going to do that. We're going to use that space for our loop. So finishing up the other side of your thread, we're going to progress it, going back through all those same holes that we just added, moving that seed bead out of the way. A lot of those 15s kind of want to get trapped in with the needle. Give a nice tight pull. Finish up with our seed beads and into the middle. So again, normally we would grab some beams and then do our middle seed bead section. Instead, what we're going to do is make our loop. To make our loop, we are going to add a 15, an 8, 2 15s, and an 8 on the right needle. On the left needle here, I want you to add 15, 8, 2 15s, and then I'm going to sew through the 8-0 seed bead that I added with the right needle in the opposite direction. You can see that just kind of brings them to the point of a V where you have thread coming out of either side of that 8-0 seed bead. From there you can choose to use your 15s or your 8-0 seed beads, or even use a variety of them to make the loop to go around the cup button. I'll use a variety of them. You can do a pattern. You can go back and do peyote stitch too, just to kind of make it a little bit bigger of a design. I'll just go in and kind of add in some of my 8-0s between my 15-0s. And you want the loop here to be big enough to go around your cup button, but not too big that it's going to slide off. If you're using a different style clasp, like a toggle or a lobster clasp or a push clasp, here's where you would add that in as well. So you'd go back into the design, use a wire guard, and finish up with that same kind of pattern. So once you have your beads on your loop or on your thread, I'm going to see how much more we need to go. Pour out a couple more of my 15s here. Get a couple more of those on my thread to make the loop big enough. And then from here, check my loop size after I add my 15s to close off my pattern. So for my pattern, I just did 4 15s and then an 8. That thread and needle then I'm going to bring back through that 8-0 seed bead and out to the other side. At this point, you want to make sure that your cup button fits nicely and snugly inside there. I'm actually going to go in and take off one rotation that I did of the 15s and the 8s because I made it a little bit too big. Take that thread and needle then back through the 8-0 seed bead, and now with your other needle, reinforce that loop. So go back through all of those seed beads, going through them and reinforcing. And you can do this again another time with your starter thread that you were working with, that right hand thread, or you can take it around again with this thread. Like I said, you can even do peyote stitch if you would want to, kind of making the loop look a little bit more full. That's why I use the 8-0 seed beads, just to make it have a little bit of a fuller look. And come back out, the 8 on the other side. And you can see right there, it kind of missed my thread. So I'll sew back out and catch onto those seed beads. And go through. From there, your thread and needle are out opposite sides of that 8/0 seed bead. What we're going to do is get them to the same side and tie them off. So I'm going to give nice tight pulls to pull the thread down and make sure that no extra thread is showing below the loop or above the loop. Again, before you tie off, you just want to make sure that your cup button fits comfortably. And now get your needles to the same place. If you want to, you can even take this thread around one more time and have it come out the 8/0. I'm going to sew down a little bit in the project so the knot that I'm creating by knotting the two threads together is not going to sit right next to the clasp. It's going down a little bit. So I'm going in here to the design and bringing my thread and needle out right next to my white round duo. I'm bringing it out next to that intentionally because the round duo is that white pearl. So that'll mean you won't see it a lot, because if I put the knot right next to a white bead, it'll conceal it a little bit. So I'm sewing back in through the project, right to the points where the thread will meet up with one another. So back through the 15, back through the round duo, and out. At this point then, the threads are coming out right at the same place in opposite directions. Remove your needles from your project and simply tie a knot. Right over left, and then switch hands to do left over right. One more time, switching which hands I'm holding the thread in, and get that square knot. From there, I'll take my thread burner, burn down the thread ends, so I just have a little tiny bit of thread there left showing. I'm going to take my thread burner and fuse those edges down just a tiny little bit. What that's going to do is ball the thread ends up, so that way the knots that I created cannot be seen, and also they won't come apart because it creates a little bit of that ball at the end. So at that point then, you are done with your papyrus bracelet. You can see it's a little bit big on me, so I made it average size. When you do make it average size, you're going to end up with about 13 of your round trio or your round duo beads, just to let you know kind of a count that you would need if you want to make it a 7-inch standard bracelet. If you want to make it a little bit smaller for 6 1/4, look into 12 of your round trios, and if you need it to be 7 1/4, you can look into 14 of the round duos. And I keep saying trios, I apologize, round duos. Again, if you need any of the supplies for this fun papyrus bracelet, you can go to the little eye in the corner when you move your mouse over there with the information, or a better area to go is below the video to the little date stamp of when the video was created and what it's about. Kind of click the show more or the down arrows and get links to all the different products that we have here listed for you guys. Also, if you want to, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel to get regular updates on projects such as this papyrus bracelet, as well as fun new designs that we're working on. Also, we do videos on products and product reviews, as well as informational things of what's going on in the beading world and also with Potomac Bead Company. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to, you can even stay more connected with us and to the beading world in general by joining our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. There people show off the wonderful designs they make. It's a really helpful, interactive community of beaders that do tons of different designs and tons of different ways of creating gorgeous jewelry that are super helpful, nice, and really kind of expand the beading world with knowledge and great information. As always, everybody, thank you so much for watching this fun papyrus bracelet, and have fun creating one of your own.